Hi everyone, I hope you're doing well and welcome to part 2 of my Industrial Techno 4 template explanation. This template basically have been created from scratch live during my live stream session. It's every 2 Monday on my other Audio React channel. And last week we talked about each element, the sound design, the MIDI, the purpose of each track. And this week we were gonna focus more on the arrangement, the global idea, the automation, modulation if they are, mixing and mastering. Alright, but first let's re-listen a little bit how the track sound. So it's quite a noisy industrial track. Alright, so that gives you an idea, a little bit of the track. It's been heavily inspired by, I don't know if you've seen Paula Temple on the Hate YouTube channel. I don't remember where it was, but yeah, she played this kind of very distorted, industrial, noisy techno, and that was the inspiration. That's the main global idea. It was this industrial lead that's gonna play the whole track, and then it's just this hammering kick, and then some very driving drums that play here and there. Then you will have the verse where you have a more percussive, let's say, part where you don't hear anymore this industrial sound, and then I bring it back. So yeah, what we're gonna do is we're gonna listen to the track from the beginning until the end. I will explain every time each part of the track, what's happening, what I'm adding, why. So we start straight away with the intro. You will have just the kick drum and the rumble basically with the ambience playing. So the ambience sound like this. This is really like to set the mood. Then we add the hats, driving hats to add movement. Alright, then we are already around almost 40 seconds and you don't really have like main element. You need something like, which is not just drums. So that's where I introduced this perk too, which is quite interesting with the SFX. So this could almost be considered not anymore like an intro and like more like a verse. You can see basically I put verse here, so it's a bit weird to have the verse before the chorus, but it's because this part of the track is quite groovy and it's not like just an intro that you're gonna transition with your track. It's really like part of the energy and really like very energetic moment of the track. So you cannot call it an intro anymore. So that's why I call it a verse, and I introduced this reverse snare as well, which is gonna add even more interest to the track, make it even groovier. Still have the ambience a little bit playing in the background. Until I'm gonna add the ride. So again, to add an extra energy is the part of the track where I'm gonna slowly introduce the main lead. So you can see here the lead is gonna play a different pattern than the main. See here it's playing another note on top. When the break starts, you have a new kind of fresh element coming, and it's not just the same than before, but just with the filter more open, just to add a bit of variation, making more interesting. So yeah, we go into this. We add the reverb, the right. You can hear the sound coming louder and louder because we open the filter. And here we goes the break, so you can hear we get rid of the hats and the ride. We keep the kick, but we have on our mixdown some master effect, which is basically here a low-cut, and we have a riser effect as well, which is kind of a wash out. So you're gonna hear it's just gonna put your sound into a lot of delay and reverb. You see if I exaggerate. So that's gonna be automated. You can see it's there. One thing I haven't talked, but we'll come back to it maybe later a little bit more when I talk about automation, is I have this bit repeat, which is like a repeat, which I activate, deactivate, and so yeah, that's what created that, and that's what helped the transition. So here I have a low pass filter. It's basically just an EQ, but which was opening slowly, so letting pass more higher frequencies, so you hear it more and more. It's helped build the tension. It's helped introduce the sound in a more smooth way, and so everything is going up with the, you're gonna hear with the riser as well, the delay and the reverb, kind of creating this rising effect and this like tension until the point where I will use this bit repeat effect, cut the kick. You're gonna see there is a mute here, so we're gonna mute the kick. Nothing is playing except the lead, and then after we drop our sound. So it sounds like this. You can see the riser is filtering delay reverb. And then we goes into chorus one with the drop, where we just have basically the lead and the kick playing, the ambience as well a little bit, but yeah. Then I add the hat and the reverb snare. Then is the ride and the snare. Alright, so here what's happening is we introduced this new element. At that point we needed to add variation, so I needed to add a new element, and this is this high-pitched synth. But to even kind of make it more interesting, I get rid of all of the drum. Basically you can see the hats, and the right is it's just a trick that works sometimes, you know, when you have a very rich part of the track with a lot of element. If you transition with a part which is much more quieter, obviously you create a big dynamic difference, and this difference kind of create a big impact. And especially with this high-pitched synth that arrive, I don't know, it's just like bring the track to another level. The perk add a bit of groove. Alright, so here what's happening. So we have this high moment, and I have different possibility there of transition or how the track could evolve. Obviously it was already playing this lead for a long period of time, and I kind of needed to change, so go into a kind of a verse where you don't have this lead playing, and the idea is to have something more percussive. So that's what is this part, you have more percussive elements. So I had to get rid of the lead, so that's why here I'm basically not, what I could have done is add more hats and drums, and on the end I've made the opposite. It still sounds good basically, but what's gonna help you is for the next part of the track, for the transition, is gonna be way much more easier, because here again, this time you're gonna go from something very kind of low in energy to something very high in energy. And to have this big dynamic, it's gonna also make easy the transition from having the main lead playing to not having the main lead playing. So hope you get what I mean, but yeah, this way you transition into two parts a bit more easily. Yeah, one thing I forget to say about this track is like it's kind of a randomless track, which means that you don't really have like break or time to breathe. It's always just banging during the whole track. You just have some small break here and there, and here's exactly the idea. Like you could expect have a bit of a quieter moment in terms of energy here, but actually no, I use the verse and I go even like almost harder because you have some percussion, you have hats coming. But yeah, this way the whole track is just driving, and it's relentless. And then I add more perk. I had this noise that I talked about last week, which is basically just a wall of white noise, and obviously it's heavy sidechain, so it's just like add some groove and kind of act as an ambience. You can see that I've removed the ambience here because these parts are very noisy and there is so many elements already that you barely hear the ambience, and so the ambience doesn't really have a purpose anymore. I actually cut it here, I forget to say, and yeah, then we go into this very high energy, and here I'm gonna do kind of the same trick where I build the energy. You see, you're gonna have the ride, and then I'm gonna drop into something with no hats, no ride, less noise, and obviously the idea is to make things quieter, and because you can see that the breakthrough is coming, so I'm gonna need again to go from something low in energy and then build the tension to drop and have something huge. So yeah, that's how it's. Here I reintroduce the yeah, this part I could almost have called it like a bridge, because it's really what's gonna help transition between the verse and the chorus. Is the part where I get rid of all of the drums. I still keep the perk because I still need this energy and to keep things interesting, but then I take the opportunity to reintroduce the main lead, and then we go into the breakthrough, which is kind of a very small break with a kind of a snare roll. So you can see the snare roll. I put back the snare to play 4 bar before, so like this, it doesn't get out of nowhere, and this allows me to add variation as well in this part, which in the bridge part. So yeah, you're gonna bring everything up, obviously bring the tension. You have a very short break. Like I said, I don't want the track to never really stop. It's a relentless track where it's always driving energy. And then this time I'm gonna drop differently than before. Before I was dropping, I had no drums, which this difference of dynamic was creating a nice impact, and I've done that a couple of times during the track. And obviously I like to always have different kind of build up and drop, because it's what had originality. So this is where for this drop you can see I have the ride playing straight away. I have all of my hats, all of my percussion, it's everything playing like full on. I have the lead 2 playing as well. So here you don't have like before like a drop in dynamic, like which gonna create a nice impact. Here it's more like you had something very high in dynamic and you still keep building, and you even like go full on straight away with all of the drum, all of the perk possible, all of the synth. Everything is just like full on, which is different than what I will usually do, where I will have the chorus with no drum, then gradually I add more energy and more intensity. Here, different way. Just when we drop, we straight away have everything full in your face. And yeah, it's just to have a different arrangement, to don't redo exactly the same thing that you've done before in the track. You want something different, so that's why I decided to do that. So yeah, let's now roll. So yeah, and that's our chorus 2. So you can see the chorus 2 is a bit shorter than the other one, obviously because I have everything already full blast on. I cannot keep the same, I don't really have much more element. I cannot really add much more element because the spectrum is already full. So I just keep it 16 bar, which is quite enough. I'm dropping with the lead 2 straight away, and I add noise as well after 8 bar, just to add a bit of variation. And then after, it's just go into the final break where we low pass everything, get rid of the main lead, and then after getting slowly off the perk and hats and everything. Here what I like to do for the transition for in the final break and the outro is obviously when I enter in the final break, I usually keep the hats, but I always get rid of the ride, you know, this very noisy, energetic element. Here I keep all of the perk because I was already getting rid of the lead 2 and the noise, and the lead 1 is going, the filter is going down, so you don't want to remove everything in the same time because it sounds weird and too abrupt and not natural. So that's why I kept them a little bit even in the outro, and I obviously start to get rid of all of the perk one by one, slowly, and then after I get rid of the hats, and yeah, so. Then from there, it's more like a DJ outro where you will start to transition the track. Even you can start from there, but yeah, you get the idea of this part of the track. And yeah, that's pretty much it about the global arrangement. Now let's talk about modulation variation. There is not that many, so I most of the time use an EQ to kind of introduce a sound or like to remove the sound slowly to don't be too abrupt. So that's what I've done with the lead 1, where you can see like this is basically a low pass filter there that's going up and then down, and then during the verse and then back up during the second chorus. I've done the same with lead 2. So here I've done a kind of a interesting modulation where you can hear it's going down and then back up. I don't know if you noticed when I was playing, but you're gonna hear just a little variation, you know, I reduce, you don't hear it from a moment and then you start to hear it again. The mix down, you can see I had a lot of automation. So I use the bit repeat. I like this, and I have 2 styles. I have this one, but I also have this one, so 2 different speeds. It adds variation. It helps with the transition as well because it lets the listener know that something is coming. And yeah, this is just low cut. Again, this is something, this EQ I like to use to help with the transition. Because sometimes if you remove the kick, you can remove the kick. Sometimes it's work, but sometimes it sounds weird. And like, you know, because it's a very energetic track, you kind of lose the energy for a short period of time and it's kind of weird. So with a low cut, you still have the rhythm, like kind of the clock going, and just you don't have the bass. And then after when you remove the EQ, you have back the low end, and it's very impactful, powerful, and effective. So that's why I use it all the time for all the break, all the small break, all the transition. And then you have this washout effect that I used during the breaks. It's just like I said, like a delay, reverb, and an EQ, and it's just like kind of makes things rise a little bit, go up and bring the tension. But yeah, that's pretty much it. It's pretty straightforward. All right, and then we're gonna talk about mixing. So if you're already familiar with my video and my template explanation, you know what I'm about to say. For me, I like to kind of mix as I produce, because I believe that the sound selection, like which sound you pick up to put together, which synthesizer, on which frequency your synthesizer is compared to another one, all of this decision, that's gonna already make like 90% of your track. So if you make sure you pick up elements, like for example, a kick and a hat that fit well together, almost like you pick them up, you put them together, and you're like, okay, I don't even need to mix them because as it is, it sounds good. The job is 90% done. And then yes, I will usually use like obviously EQ to cut the low end, boost some frequency I like, remove some I don't like. Usually I boost more than what I cut. And then we usually use saturation to make things louder, add a bit more harmonic. And then I will use delay. Delay is more, most of the time, sound design purpose. It's more to add groove and rhythm than really like mixing. And then reverb, obviously, to put your sound into a space. That would be the main element I use as mixing. One thing which is super important and overlooked way too much is making sure actually each element is at the right level. So you can see here like your balance basically is right, because this is what's gonna fix a lot of problem as well. Unfortunately, I cannot really give tips because every track is different. Everything is like, in one case in one track you were gonna have your ride, I don't know, at -14, and the other track is gonna be at -7, and the other track is gonna be at -20. It will always change, so there is no really rule for that. You just have to trust your ears and walk and walk and walk to have your ears getting better and getting trained. But that's something to not overlook. There is rarely too many elements which are related to mix in my track. Same goes with the hats. You see, just have a reverb. You never have EQ or distortion even on this track. You just have, you can see like all the single track, they are like empty except this one, which not even this one, no. They are all like, it's just basically a reverb. Then I can talk to you about how I like to set my reverb. So this is gonna be a rule of thumb. It doesn't apply 100% all the time, but I like to have like kind of a 3-dimension for the reverb, or let's say like 3 space. I will have a small closer space where I will usually put my drum. You know, you don't have a long tail. It's a pretty short sound, but it's allowed your sound to don't be too dry, and it kind of enhance it, but without having this long tail or without really giving a color. I usually set my reverb with a dry rate around 30% and the decay before 1 second for this type of drum room or effect. Then after, obviously, you can play with the delay, the diffuse, and everything for different tone and color, and with the size as well. Then, for example, for the leads or element are a bit more, let's say like main element, I will have a bit of a longer decay, so it can go from 1 second to, let's say, 4 seconds, 5 seconds. Again, not too much dry wet. This is a tip I can give you. Beginner mistake is to put a lot of reverb, because obviously it sounds better, but then obviously it's a big mess in your mix. Same with the echo. This tip is worth it as well, to don't put too much dry wet or feedback, because it can really create a long tail end which is going to overlap each other's sound. So obviously this is a rule of thumb, because sometimes you want a lot of delay, so you're going to put just a lot of delay and you're not going to follow this rule. But sometimes if you just want a little rhythmical thing, you can feel like even if you reduce like 10% the dry wet amount, you can feel like it doesn't change that much the sound, but you can feel like the sound is getting clearer. So that can be a nice tip to improve your mix. And then the last reverb would be like one for the ambience, where in that case, you have a way bigger dry wet amount. So wait, it's here actually. So here it's 40%, and you had the other one before. Here the decay is not that long to be fair. It's like 4 seconds. But because the dry wet amount is quite important, it's kind of put them in the background. So here is not too much in the background, to be fair. But like I said, it's a rule of thumb. I know I'm not always doing that, but it's to give you my directive of 3 different type of reverb, 3 different type of size for different type of element. But yeah, I'm going over a little bit each track to see if I have made some mixing decisions, especially. And yeah, like look at some sidechain. Yes, I use a lot of sidechain, obviously, because you need to have things pumping to your kick. So I have this sidechain track here, which is basically a 909 clap playing every beat, every kick, every time you kick them is playing. And then usually ratio at 4, fast attack. The release depends, but usually around 50 milliseconds. And then I just adjust I put in peak mode most of the time, and I just adjust the threshold according to how much of the pumping effect I want. But yeah, nothing more. All right, and finally, let's talk about the mastering. So this is what I like to call homemade mastering. I will always recommend you mastering to be done by someone who does that for a living, like a professional guy who got the great room to do that, the great competence to do that. However, you can always learn a little bit how it's working. If you want to do your own mastering, for example, you want to see how your track compete with other, you want to try your track in the club. So it's great to have a little bit of base of mastering, and so that's why I call it homemade mastering, and I'm going to show you what I've done here. Alright, so first utility with just the bass in mono under 120 Hz, adding a bit of width with the width parameter. Doesn't do much to the sound, it's just to make sure that you're safe in the club with the bass mono. Then you have some EQ. So this is the pen usually I used to rebalance. I just usually first add a low cut at 30 Hz just to get rid of all of these rumbling things that just gonna make you sound more muddy. Then around 200 or let's say 180 and 400, 500 hertz, you always have, usually, not always, but you often have like a part where I feel it's like if I remove, I gain a little bit in clarity. It's kind of a trade-off because you kind of lose maybe a bit of punch, but you gain a bit of clarity, and here Here I usually like to boost around 3 kHz or 3, 5, 8 kHz, 1 kHz sometimes. It's quite a broad boost and quite high boost, but yeah, it just makes the sound brighter. Slight boost on the bass, but and then look at that 16 kHz. Then we have some glue compression. So here there is two purposes, obviously, like make things a bit more glue compact, but as well I like to use the soft clipping to just add a bit of nice distortion. It's very gentle, it's nothing crazy, but it had a bit. And for the settings, few things. First, I always EQ the incoming signal, so what's gonna trigger your compressor, because if you don't have the EQ, it's basically, again, you kick and the low end who's gonna trigger your compressor, because it's what's got the higher energies, so that's what's gonna trigger your compressor. You don't want that, you want something more homogeneous. So I use the EQ, I get rid of the low end, so like this is a more overall treatment of your signal. And you want a slow attack because you don't want your transient, for example, of your kick to be affected by the compressor. And then the release, I usually use the ratio as 4, and then the release, it really depends per track. It depends how much of a pumping effect you want as well. And yeah, I would just then yeah, then usually I try to go around 3 dB of reduction, but I never go too crazy. And then I usually push the makeup a little bit to have the soft clipping. Alright, then I reuse, it's actually the same multiband preset than I use for the kick drum. I talked about it last week. It's just like kind of making the low end a little bit tighter. Then you have channel EQ again to boost a little bit the mid-high. I felt like it was still it's very subtle. And then you have color limiter. So this, I use it more like a tape plugin. Like Ableton doesn't have like a tape saturation plugin, and I found like the color limiter, it's kind of close to that type of saturation. It really adds some warmth and some saturation and some loudness to your sound without damaging it. And so usually the color, we say if you want something more brighter or darker, and I would usually go just a little bit of saturation, like 0.9, 0.8. And then I don't really, like, I limit a little, but not too much. You can see just like alright, and then I use 2 limiter in series. It's just like obviously to make things louder. Why 2? Because you have one to squash a little the transient first, so like this you can be a bit more smoother. It's not like just one brick wall limiter, you have 2 smooth limiter. But yeah, it's just louder. And yeah, with that you got something good and ready to play in a club, or like to try and compare with other tracks to reference and see how it sounds mastered. Alright, I hope you liked this video, guys. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to grab the template. It's a great way to support me. The link in the description, and see you next week for a new video, guys. Bye bye.